Hello and welcome to Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. It's Patricia Steere with you. My guest is Mike Williams. Mike Williams of the Paul is Dead channel, the PID channel. Oh, now we've got a little issue here. Sorry, guys. Now we fixed it. Mike Williams is also the host of the Sage of Quay Radio Hour. Now, this show, episode 289, is a follow-up to episode 225, done in April of 2018 on Paul McCartney. There is a new book that has come out that has delved deeper into the has Paul McCartney died and been replaced saga, conspiracy, investigation, or total load of you know what. It all depends on who's doing the looking. So Mike Williams is here, and what we're going to do is go over, for those who are very new to this, the 101 on the whole Paul McCartney replacement, and then get into some of the juicier details. Mike, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Patricia, for having me come back. Our last show, which we did, the first show we did on Paul is Dead, has over 50,000 views. So a lot of people have an interest in the topic.
Yes, it's one of those things that on the surface sounds ridiculous, even to people who are seasoned investigators into some of these things. But once you look into it, you can't. It's like flat Earth in a way. You can't go back, and you can't deny that there is something going on here. And I think it all goes back to Luciferianism. But that's something that we're going to get to as we get a little further along. That's a bit too heavy to start off with. Okay, Paul McCartney, nice boy from Liverpool. He blew his mind out in a car. Take it away from there.
Well, the Beatles are the greatest rock band in the world. Some people might argue with that, but most people will acknowledge, especially most musicians will acknowledge, that they are and were the greatest band in the world. And so the Beatles started in 1962 and then had tremendous fame as they exponentially grew from 1962 through 1966. And in 1966, after the Revolver album was recorded and released, biological Paul McCartney, now this is how the theory goes, the conspiracy goes, I should say, died in a car crash. And depending upon which researcher you speak to, the date could be August, it could be September, it could be November. And Paul was replaced by a double, a lookalike. And I probably should add that the double and lookalike got to look like Paul McCartney because of an extensive amount of surgery, fillers, and they also used latex. So the new guy in the band is Bill Shepherd. Some people will refer to him as Billy Campbell or William Campbell, but the safest name to go by is the one that he uses as an alias, which is Billy Shears. So I'll use Billy Shears for the sake of this discussion. And so Billy took over the band in late 1966. That was part of the deal when he met with Brian Epstein and John Lennon after biological Paul died. And he's been playing the part now for 53 years, since 1966. So we have been listening to and watching an imposter for the last 50 plus years.
People will always ask this question, same one they ask about flat Earth. Why? Why the lie?
Well, at its very core, the Beatles, we'll start with what the Beatles were intended to be, and they were very successful at. The Beatles were a creation of Tavistock from the beginning to end. And the Beatles were created in order to engage dramatic social and cultural engineering, to change the culture. So to take, as an example, in the Western world, we'll use the United States as an example, you had this very established set of traditional values, Christianity, and so on. And so the pyramid of power, the controllers, they decided long ago, because everything is planned way in ahead. So they have a strategic plan that's in place, and these plans are in place for decades in advance of when they actually get rolled out. That's the thing. They're always way ahead of the curve, because that's why they're the controllers, right? So, um, so they put the Beatles in play in order to shake that up, in order to break down the old way of thinking, to break down the quote unquote traditional values, and to move the population and the masses toward a more Luciferian way of life, way of thinking.
You can look at how they first appeared when they came out, and how they physically, with their clothing and the way their hair was done, morphed and helped form and change and influence society's standards of dress. In the beginning, they had dark suits and ties. Although their hair was a bit long for the time, they still looked like normal, nice boys, but a little wild because they were into rock and roll. But that was the way they hooked you in. They weren't so horrible if you were a young teen that your parents would be very angry that you'd be listening to them. But as they morphed and changed, and then there got to be more of a psychedelic vibe to how they looked, and then a very world peace Thelema way to the way they were, they took their audience and gained new followers along with them for the ride, and manipulated everybody without anyone even realizing it was happening.
Right. And that's very perceptive, Patricia, because what they did was they took the Beatles in the very beginning, in the 1962-63 timeframe. They had the mop tops. And then what they did was they incrementally and very methodically stepped them through the evolution. So coming off of Elvis and so on, then came the Beatles, and they were dressed in their suits. They had their mop top hair. And yeah, some parents didn't like it, but I guess the thought could be, well, it could be worse, right?
It could be worse. They're wearing suits at least.
Wearing suits. And so you can see how even the music evolved over time. So the early albums like Please Please Me and Meet the Beatles had a lot of cover music still that they were playing, and along with original Lennon and McCartney material compositions. And then we get to albums like Revolver, and before that Rubber Soul. And all of a sudden, we're seeing a very, very different band. Very, very different music, a lot more complex, and taking the listening audience and their fans into a very different place musically. So on the Revolver album, as an example, there's a very psychedelic song on there, Tomorrow Never Knows. And that was really the Beatles' first foray into the psychedelic era. And then, of course, Biological Paul was still in the picture at that time. And then when he passed away, and the date that I focus on is September 11th, 1966. And maybe we can get into some of why September 11th is that date. It's very important in the occult circles. William Shepard, or Bill Shepard, Billy Shears, stepped in. He stepped in late 1966. Billy was very skilled in his musical abilities. He was highly trained, and he was earmarked. He was groomed and tapped very early on to take on a very significant role as time went on. And whether he was tapped specifically for the Beatles, that's an open switch, an open discussion. But clearly, because of Billy's bloodlines, he was marked for very successful and influential types of things in his life. He was going to be a mover and a shaker. And so he got tapped to replace Paul McCartney, and that's when Sgt. Pepper came out. Pepper is Billy's album from beginning to end. The other Beatles, John Lennon, obviously contributed tracks to the album, but Billy was the leader. He was the one that called all the shots from 1967, Sgt. Pepper on. And so Pepper was his debut album, and it took the world, right, by surprise. Before that, we had Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, and everybody thought that Pet Sounds was the holy grail of music at the time, and the Beach Boys themselves thought that. And then when Pepper came out a few months later, that was that. So it set a whole new standard for music. So that was the introduction into the psychedelic era. 1967, as many of the listeners might know, was the Summer of Love. It was the Monterey Pop Festival, which Billy was coordinating with John Phillips. And the Monterey Pop Festival was, it was a
The bullseye of all this cultural change.
of all this cultural change, right? With the bands that they had at the time that played, and Free Love. It was the drug culture. Everything kicked off with the Monterey Pop Festival, and Billy was behind the coordinating of that, as I said, with John Phillips. So so from 1967 through 1969 into 1970, Billy was the leader of the Beatles. It wasn't John Lennon. The story that we're given is John Lennon was the leader of the Beatles. Lennon was up through 1966 when a deal was cut, or I should say Lennon agreed to Billy's demands that in order for Bill to take control and reins of the Beatles, that he had to have full control, creative control of the band, and it had to be his band. And John relinquished that control. In the Memoirs of Billy Shears, it says that John did that under duress. He was very upset about biological Paul's death, but he did agree to it. And so from that point on, Bill Shepherd has been playing, or Billy Shears has been playing the role of Paul McCartney for more than 50 years, 53 years.
Many people feel that Yoko Ono is the one that brought about the demise of the Beatles and would, influenced John Lennon. But indeed, it was Billy Shears who called the shots as soon as Pepper came out, all the way to the very end. His decision, or the people who pulled his puppet strings, to end the Beatles, right?
No, that's exactly right. The Beatles ended because Billy decided to end the Beatles. There was a lot of stress within the band. There were times when the three other Beatles, John, George, and Ringo, got along with Bill. There were other times when there was a lot of tension, and Billy just got to the point where it just wasn't advantageous anymore. It was time to pull the plug on it. It was not Yoko Ono, even though Billy found Yoko to be annoying because she was always there. But in the revised version of Memoirs, it's here's the blue cover. Yeah, he states in the book in black and white that Yoko was a handler for John. Okay, so that was Yoko's role. Yoko's role was not just to be John's lover and then wife, but she was his handler. Yeah.
The colors of the books. I mean, we all know about the red pill, the blue pill, the Matrix, and we've got the red cover book that came out first, the Memoirs of Billy Shears, and then coming out 9/9/2018, and the 8 and 1 and 18 adds up to 9. And well, we all know the significance of the number 9 involving the Beatles. Even this episode is episode that's got a 9 in the very last number. And I, even on the thumbnail, I highlighted it in yellow just to even bring that out. Go ahead with what you were going to say.
The blue and red cover.
The blue and red cover.
We should talk about that. Yeah, it's very significant. Yeah, it's very significant. So blue and red represents their Masonic colors. So there's the Blue Lodge and there's the Red Lodge.
Okay. And so that in the Matrix as well is probably why there's a red pill and blue pill.
Exactly.
And I never knew exactly where that came from. I'm sure there's others too who didn't know.
Yeah, that's what it is. There's the Blue Lodge and there's the Red Lodge. And the Red Lodge outranks the Blue Lodge. Okay,
so that's the book cover that came out first, was the red.
That's the book that came out first, right? The red cover came out first, September 9th, 2009. That's when Billy first really started the full-blown disclosure process. It was back in 2009.
It makes sense. The red book kind of outranks the blue book because it's the bombshell that came out. And the blue book is a follow-up with more information, deeper information, and darker information.
Yeah. So what happened with the red book? The red book is a great book, by the way. So if anybody's read that, you'll know that there's a lot of information in there. But it was a bit more cryptic in the way that Billy, via Tom Uharry, is the encoder. We can call him the author or the ghostwriter, but Tom encoded the book, and we can get into that a little bit also, what encoding actually means. but it was ambiguous in certain areas, and the reader really had to scratch their head sometimes to figure out where Billy was going or what he was trying to explain. Um, so there were many times in the book, in the Red Book, where some of the passages in the narrative was a little difficult to really pinpoint. Like, what's he really saying, type of thing. So fast forward 9 years, 2018, because it's the nines. Billy made a decision that he wanted to further push along the disclosure. And so I was doing shows going back to 2016 on the memoirs of Billy Shears. And I should say, as I say in every show, I have nothing to do with the book. I'm not compensated by it. The reason why I talk about the book a lot is because I have found it to be, out of all the books I have read on the Beatles, to be the best foundational book to work from in order to try to prove or disprove the conspiracy, because the book is just packed with information and details. It's just incredible how much information is in the book. So about 4 months before Tom was told to update the book, I got an email from Tom, and Tom said to me, "Hey, Mike, William," they refer to him as William, "is looking to speed up disclosure." And Tom didn't know why. And he had said to me, I don't know why. I didn't get a reason. They just said that we need to put out another version of the book, an updated version of the book with more detail.
I was thinking it's because he's getting older and maybe he has an illness that's not yet been disclosed to the public.
Well, I think, I think that could be it. That crossed my mind also. I also believe that there's no doubt in my mind that Billy is pulsing the level of awakening with regard to who he is. And I think that it could be also that they were not maybe as happy as they would have been or could have been. Maybe they were thinking that it would be a more aggressive awakening. Maybe, I'm just saying. So Tom, he contacted me 4 months before the revised version of the book came out, and he said to me, "Mike, you're doing these shows, and so could you give me 4 or 5 questions that keep coming up, that yet people are sending to you, where people are unsure or scratching their heads or looking for more detail, because I can include that in the revised version of the book, the September 9th, 2018 version." So I gave Tom 4 or 5 topics that I said that needed to have further clarification, because people were stuck on these things, myself included, on some of these things. So some of those questions had to do with Billy playing the role of Vivian Stanshall in the Bonzo Dog Band with Neil Innes. The first book talks about that. It admits that Billy was in the band, but it was still very difficult for some people to get their heads wrapped around, because how exactly did that work? In the new book, Billy explains exactly how it worked. Also, with regard to his early role, when he played the character of Phil Ackrell, when he was playing with Denny Lane in the band The Diplomats back in the very early 1960s. So anyway, I gave Tom these questions, and I had no foreknowledge as to whether he was going to use these questions, or I had no idea. Much to my surprise, and I was very happy to see that he did answer all of those questions that I had submitted. And so the book, the Blue Book, really goes into a lot more detail. It gets away from the ambiguity. Tom has added, I think it's 66 footnotes. Okay, so there's the number 66, to further explain more about how things went down, how things were done, how things were navigated. So he gets into a lot of detail about the structure of the Illuminati. He talks about Luciferianism and Satanism, and the concept of free will, which they call free agency. He talks about, he actually gets into the moon landings being faked. a hoax, that 9/11 was an inside job. Mark Devlin and I talked about this as to why that was included in the book. Mark asked me for my opinion on that. And the reason for that is because what Bill is doing is, as part of this disclosure process, he's looking to bring those who are awake or awakening into the inner circle some more, so that you can understand how this works, and also to ensure that the whole Billy Shears, Beatles, Paul McCartney discussion doesn't just focus on Tavistock and the Beatles and Tavistock. So what Bill is doing via Tom is connecting all the dots and explaining that this pyramid of power, that's what I call it, the pyramid of power, has 66 degrees within it. The first 33 degrees are the 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The next 13 degrees are the degrees of the Illuminati, and there's 20 degrees above those 13, and those 20 degrees are degrees that nobody knows who's there. These are essentially hidden beings, people, truly people that are invisible.
So Billy Shears, the person who is currently playing Paul McCartney, most of the time anyway, I mean, we don't know 100%, is basically in the Illuminati.
Yeah. So he is in the Illuminati. And this is something that I had surmised very early on because of the level of disclosure. So within the pyramid of power, we'll talk about Freemasonry, you attain a certain degree, and you are only allowed to know up to that degree. Anything above that degree is knowledge that you're not going to get or to understand until you achieve that degree. So when I read the first book and I was reading the chapter on Freemasonry, I thought to myself, well, he's got to be in the illuminated degrees, in one of the 13 degrees, because he's talking about structure within the pyramid, about Freemasonry, that if he were still a Freemason within the 33 degrees, I'm not so sure he'd be able to talk about, So, so in the Blue Book, there is a footnote. There is a footnote that Tom has in the book, and to paraphrase, it says that that Bill is in the Illuminati. He is the Illuminati. And the other ways that I picked up on it, Patricia, was I would watch Billy very closely, like when he was with other Freemasons. As an example, David Letterman, Barack Obama, all of your presidents are Freemasons, by the way, folks. The country was founded on Freemasonry. And they always deferred to Bill. It was just his body language and so on. And you can tell if you watched closely that Billy had a higher rank. And so I would watch this interaction.
Interesting. I've seen, and maybe we all have seen, Billy Shears, aka current Paul McCartney, not bio Paul, interacting with, I believe it was David Letterman, where he admitted outright that he isn't the original Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And this is the free agency that you're speaking of. And this is the free will. And it's up to us to understand that they're putting it in plain sight.
Yes.
We are the ones, it's on our own shoulders to awaken and understand what's going on. Not just that, Bio Paul's dead and they replaced him. On the surface, that seems like no big deal. If I had a band and the lead singer, was no longer with us, I'd get a person to replace he or she. That's not a problem. But this is the molding of public consciousness. This band was so important in that they needed to continue that going on. And whether or not Bio Paul was killed in a satanic ritual, which is another interesting concept to all of this, or he just died in a car wreck like anybody possibly could have, that's one of those things that's up for debate. But the Freemasonry that went on between, I don't know if you call it Freemasonry, the and I know, wink, wink, nod, nod, that was going on when I saw the talk show with David Letterman and Paul McCartney, where he basically told us all the truth about what's going on.
Right.
Was eye-opening. But to the average person who doesn't know, they just thought it was a joke.
Yeah, they thought it was a joke and he was just playing off on the quote unquote the rumor, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a great interview to go back to because I have been trying to educate my audience and folks that listen to the shows on what the Masons refer to as masterfully speaking. So when a Mason masterfully speaks, they can reveal a tremendous amount of truth, but they have to do it in an encoded way. So that's how Billy speaks. Billy speaks in an encoded way. I mean, and you have to decode it. On the show with Mark, I used a quote that's attributed to Confucius, which says that signs and symbols rule the world, not words and laws. Right. So when you learn the signs and symbols, which includes the the technique of masterfully speaking, you will understand what it is that they are telling you. See, with the Illuminati, within the pyramid, they are under no obligation to convince you of something. They will put things out there in plain sight, and then it's up to you to apply your God given gift of intellect and reasoning to be able to see the truth. And this is how they operate. And that's why it's so hard to change the world, Patricia. It's because most people don't use the God given gift of intellect and reasoning. They follow. They give their will up and they hand it over to authorities. Right?
And they'll even fight on behalf of the authorities, as
Exactly.
we've all seen in the fight scene in the movie They Live.
Yeah.
You can try to force people to put on those They Live glasses all you want until you get into a barroom brawl, basically, and you're down on the ground, exchanging punches. And some people will still refuse to see what's right there in front of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. And that's what I explain to folks. And some folks get really upset with me when I say this because I tell them that Billy has been telling us since day one that he's not Paul McCartney. They have been dropping clues every which way from Sunday since June 1st, 1967, when they released Pepper, through today. He's still doing it today. In fact, the clues today are becoming more and more overt. There are now mainstream articles that are being published about the McCartney conspiracy, about Paul is dead. It was just one 2 days ago. I think it was BuzzFeed put it out there. And they do it in a way in which they're trying to poke at those
Right.
folks that, right, are following or researching or believe the Paul is dead conspiracy. But that's how they do it.
Right.
So they're telling you,
BuzzFeed and all of these taste makers of our day using the electronic medium have taken pot shots at flat earth and other quote unquote conspiracy
right,
topics, but they are putting it out there.
exactly. So there's a reason why they're publishing those articles. It's not because, they're scouring YouTube and they're saying, oh, look, there's that guy, Mike Williams. He has a Paul is Dead channel. Let's go do something about Paul is Dead. No, this is all coordinated and orchestrated. This is part of an overall process of disclosure. So,
But we don't expect, at least I don't anyway, I don't know about you, that tomorrow on, BuzzFeed, ABC News or whatever, that Paul McCartney is going to come out and go, okay, everyone, I have an announcement, and tell everybody who he really is and what went down. I don't expect anything ever to come out on mainstream media straightforward like that about Paul McCartney, about any of the shooting events, or about Flat Earth.
no, it's going to be a process of continued incremental, methodical disclosure. In other words, what they're going to do is they're going to continue to push it out bits and pieces. And then eventually, hopefully, a critical mass of people will get it. And that's exactly what they're doing with Bill. People have said to me, Mike, when is he going to own up to this? When is he going to stand in front of a microphone and say he has been playing a character, Paul McCartney, for 53 years? I said, well, it's never going to happen. For one, and I mentioned this on the show with Mark Devlin, I don't need to be told that. I already know he's not Paul McCartney. You see?
In fact, if he came out and said he was, or if President Trump came out and said the earth was flat, I'd almost not believe it because of who they are. And we all know that they're not telling us truth. So Yeah, I mean, they're not going to come out straightforward and say it.
No,
They're
no, they're
drip
not.
feeding it to us. That's what they have to do.
I have been told that full disclosure with regard to Billy will come out after he passes away. It's not going to happen while he's alive. But he's doing a lot of disclosing. That's the thing, you know. And if people pay attention to what he's doing and what he's saying, I mean, for instance, there is a video that he put out called "Who Cares," which is immersed in Illuminati symbolism and occultism. It is immersed in it. And it's mind boggling to me that anybody would watch that video and not at least take a look at it and say, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? You've got the spirals in the background. He has a monarch butterfly on his lapel. Everything is decked out in black and white, the colors of duality and polarity. Yet, you know, you and I and those, I guess, who are watching this are in a minority. Most people are going to watch something like that. And
you could play the devil's advocate and say that he knows all about conspiracies, and people have said this to me. And so he's just using all of it, throwing it all out there with both guns blazing, monarch butterfly, mind control programming, black and white, spirals, etc., just to poke fun at it all. And he really is Bio Paul.
Yeah. That's a form of denial.
Right. Agreed.
That's denial. No, he's not biological Paul. You know, I have done an enormous amount of research into this, Patricia, as you know, and he is Billy Shepherd or Billy Campbell, Billy Shears, and he's disclosing. What people have to do is get out of denial mode, break down the barriers that you have created for yourself. Drop the idol worship. That's really what it comes down to, especially with a lot of these rock stars and these musicians. It's idol worship. Oh, I love them. I love the music. I remember when I was a kid. You have to drop it. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's something that you don't want to do. Look, it was very difficult for me.
You're a musician. You've got lavoroflovemusic.com. You grew up with the Beatles. In fact, the Beatles, I remember from talking to you previously, got you to pick up a guitar and be a musician in the first place.
Right. That's right. And so it was a very, very hard pill for me to swallow. But I had to take a step back and say, okay, look, I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to progress in my knowledge and my understanding of how the world works if I'm just going to be static and stand in place and run in place. So let's just push through it. Let's push through the fear, because that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. For many people, it's fear-based. I don't want my world to be turned upside down. I don't look. Most people think they have an understanding of the world. They believe that, you know, it's defined for them. It's in a big box. It's got a nice bow slapped on top of it. And so when you turn around and tell them, oh, by the way, your box doesn't have everything in it that it needs to have in it, you know, they short circuit. And that's what I've encountered to an amazing degree with this whole Paul McCartney conspiracy, and it, you know, Beatle fans. A lot of them are just like loathe me.
Well, there are other researchers. You are one of the preeminent researchers, but there are others, and you and they disagree on certain aspects of this. So just like Flat Earth, there's infighting, and the same thing with Paul is Dead investigation.
Yeah. I mean, there are other researchers, and look, I respect all the researchers, because at the end of the day, those that are looking into this, we agree, at least at a very base level, that biological Paul McCartney was replaced back in 1966. Okay. Now, from that point forward, it becomes a debate with regard to what exactly happened, how it happened. But that's okay. It's okay to have that debate as long as it stays civil and we have civil discourse. It's okay to agree to disagree. But you're right. I mean, even in any conspiracy, Flat Earth, McCartney, geoengineering, vaccines, just wherever you want to go, JFK, 9/11. Yeah, you're going to have different thoughts and ideas and theories about what happened. But we have to take a step back and take it at a very base level. And the base level is, well, you have at least woken up to the fact that something happened, and that something that happened does not jive with the official story. Okay, so we could apply that to Flat Earth. We can apply that to 9/11, to JFK, to anything. to McCartney. So it's a very slow, incremental process, this whole awakening process, Patricia. It's not something that's going to just, flick a switch and tomorrow everybody's going to be awake. People who are doing truth work or alternative research work, we're table setters. That's what we're doing. And it could be very frustrating at times because you do bump up against a lot of pushback, a lot.
Well, you yourself have put a video out somewhat recently saying that you're not going to abandon researching Paul McCartney and PID, Paul is dead, but you're going to put it on the back burner for a while and focus on other things that you are interested in with the Sage of Quay radio hour. And one of those things is somewhat connected to the whole Paul McCartney thing. It's Thelema, Luciferianism, Satanism, and this sort of thing. But you've been doing a round of interviews lately, and this is one of them on this channel, where you're kind of saying farewell, but not goodbye to the whole Paul McCartney issue, because you've got life to live.
Right, right. So what I've explained to folks is the reason why I'm sunsetting my ongoing Paul is dead research is because I have been digging into it for 2.5 years. I mean, really digging into it. I do work with probably a half dozen other researchers that we stay connected and we communicate via email and Skype, where we share ideas and thoughts. And some of these folks are just absolutely brilliant in their fields. One of them is Richard Balducci, who I'm going to have on my show, who is phenomenal with his understanding of the occult. Just amazing. So he has taught me a tremendous amount and given me, just enlightened me about what occultism is and how it actually works. I'm still learning, but it's people like that where we came together, and I have a certain level of expertise in certain areas. Richard has his, Wendy has hers, and Vicky has hers, and I mean it's just a bunch of folks. Mike has his. We came together and we pulled it, and we painted a picture. I think a very cohesive, coherent picture of what happened. Now, some people want to debate it. That's fine, but at the end of the day, I'm going to stand by the picture that I'm going to put together. Maybe not here today, but by the end of June, I'm going to do a full presentation on what happened, why it happened, who were the players. So, so you get to the point, Patricia, where you reach diminishing returns. In other words, I'm not really getting anything more out of this. I feel like I've learned as much as I can learn from it. I've gotten out of it as much as I could get out of it. And now it's time to move on to something else. I don't like to stay static. I'm not one of these people that likes to just, run on a conveyor belt.
Well, you've also helped a lot of people and opened a lot of minds. That's something that you fail to recognize about what you've done. What you've dropped some gems for people, and it's up to them to take it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly how I look at it. I've introduced most of the truther world to the concept of massively speaking.
Yeah, I remember our first time we did a show together about a year ago in 2018, and I didn't have the Memoirs book. I didn't really know about Thomas Hugh Harriot. Even when I read it, I didn't understand there are 3 different ways to read it. I just read it as is, and the coding, we need to get to that, definitely. Yeah. So I really appreciate what you've done, and I know a lot of people do. So we are looking forward when you put together the big presentation, the final.
Yeah, the big one is the big one's going to be a big one. I'm going to cover a lot of information in that presentation. It will take the McCartney conspiracy from cradle to grave. And, I've already started the outline. It takes forever, as you probably know, to put this stuff together, putting the slide presentations together, sequencing it, doing the voiceovers, and so on. So what happened, Patricia, was as I was reading this book, okay, I began to have the immediate revelation that the death of biological Paul McCartney is actually a subplot. So what it is that we really need to start focusing on, at least me, is I needed to understand more about Luciferianism, Satanism, Some will use Luciferianism and Satanism interchangeably. I needed to understand a lot more about this man, Aleister Crowley. I needed to understand more about Thelema, and you'll get that out of Crowley's The Book of the Law. So there's a lot of work that I have to do now. And as I've been telling folks, the reason why I'm getting into this is because the controllers, the people and beings that control our realm, this is their ideology. This is their philosophy. These are their tenets. This is their doctrine. The Illuminati, or the vast majority of the Illuminati, subscribe to Thelema, which is Aleister Crowley's religion. And there are going to be Thelemites out there that don't like me to attach the word religion to Thelema, but for lack of a better way to kind of construct it for the audience. So it's important for us, all of us, to understand this and to stop flying blind, because that's really what it is. You're flying blind if you don't understand this stuff. And understanding it for me is not just listening to somebody tell me about it. I really have to sit down and dig into it, and I have questions, and I'm going to have to myself dig in and answer my questions. And now that's not to say that if I don't find good videos or good interviews where somebody's going to really offer up some very helpful and informative information, that I won't listen to it. Of course I will. But it's a deep dive that we need to take, because too many of us, and I was in that classification too, we don't really understand what Luciferianism is. We don't understand Satanism. We don't understand Thelema. We don't understand Aleister Crowley. And so we really need to understand that if the people that are running the joint, those are the rules, and like I said, the doctrine that they play by.
That's the language they speak. And we're walking around not understanding the language that our controllers speak. I mean, how ridiculous is that? We
Exactly.
need to dig in. And there's a connection, of course. People are wondering, why are they talking about Luciferianism, Satanism, and Paul McCartney? What's going on? Well, there's many connections, but one of those connects Paul McCartney / Billy Shears, maybe Bio Paul, to Aleister Crowley, and also to Barbara Bush.
Yes. Okay, so in the Blue Book, Billy tells us two very important things. The first thing is that he was subjected to, at a very early age, his earliest memory going back to the age of 3, he was in a mind control program. Okay, so Billy, going back to 3 years old, was in a mind control program. And then also in the book, he says that he was tutored by Aleister Crowley. Now, Billy was born in 1937. He's 5 years younger than Bio Paul. Bio Paul was born in June of 1942, which, by the way, is Gemini 2, right?
Wow.
Okay. And so here we have Billy being in a mind control program and tutored by Aleister Crowley up until the age of 10, because in 1947, Crowley passed away. So the big question that some of us are still working on, and I do have some of the folks that I'm working with are looking into this. Some folks are really good at ancestry and genealogy and stuff, trying to figure out whether Crowley was actually his father or a bloodline, or just a bloodline relative. It's definite, based upon the book, that he is a bloodline relative of Aleister Crowley. I'm talking about Billy Shears, William Shepard. Because in the book, in the Blue Book, he says that he is a descendant of William Wallace. Okay? William Wallace, going back, that's the character that Mel Gibson played in Braveheart.
Yes, right.
And Billy says that although Mel's acting was very good, it wasn't very accurate. I'll just say that.
And he's been seen wearing a Scottish kilt before as well.
Scottish. He also wears Irish, the Campbell tartan, but he wears both Scottish and Irish, and I believe that's so because, and I have to do some more work into this, but I believe the Campbell name is actually on his mother's side of the house. So Billy will switch off between Irish and Scottish kilts. Okay, so that's just a theory that I have right now that I need to pursue some more.
Or
So
maybe he
even
just
though,
likes those patterns. We don't really know.
or he likes those patterns, yeah. But the way Billy is and the way Billy thinks, everything that he does is symbolic, right? So he has these bloodlines. He has a bloodline that goes back to William Wallace. He makes this very clear. He goes back. So he has blue blood. In the Blue Book, he says that they refer to William Wallace as the hardy warrior. And he left a clue for us. And the clue was Google Crowley and the hardy warrior, something to that effect. I forgot exactly what he said, but it's paraphrasing. So lo and behold, I go onto Google, I type in Aleister Crowley and hardy warrior, and boom, this website comes up, and it says that the name Crowley has its ancestry going back to the hardy warrior. So Billy's telling us his ancestry goes back to the hardy warrior. We know the Crowley surname goes back to the hardy warrior. The hardy warrior is William Wallace. So Bill is bloodline related to Aleister Crowley. Now, could Crowley be his father? Could be, yes, and here's why. Crowley was very much into sex magic, ritual sex magic. Now, if you go on Wikipedia, you're going to see that he had 4 children. I think it's 4. But we have no idea how many children Aleister Crowley fathered through sex magic. So William could actually be the illegitimate child of Aleister Crowley. Now, another thing that he mentions in the book, which was another clue for us all, is when he talks about 9/11 and how disappointed he was that his relatives were involved in orchestrating 9/11. Well, who was he referring to?
Right. When you look at his father, when you look at his mother, there aren't the connections.
Barbara Bush.
Until you look at Barbara Bush.
Barbara Bush, going back to the Pierces. And so that was another clue for us all. So it gets really weird because that would say that he and Barbara Bush are brother and sister, right? Not by the same mother, step brother and sister, I guess you could say, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is, and you said, well, why are we talking about Luciferianism, is that the pyramid that I talk about, the pyramid of power, is Luciferian. And that pyramid, as I mentioned before, the Illuminati, the vast majority of them subscribe to Crowley, to Thelema. And, Thelema basically says that you live your life based upon pursuing your true or pure will. That's what you're here to do. You're here to optimize and fulfill your life.
In some way, on the surface, for those who don't look into it deeply, that sounds good. Be you, be all you can be. Nike, just do it. It sounds very freeing and very, shall I say, 60s or 70s. But there's a much darker aspect to that, which is, crush other people, kill other people, use other people, and abuse other people.
Right, and so those who are Luciferians will say that, well, we don't all subscribe to that. So just like any other religion, there are the extreme factions that exist. And so you're going to get an argument. So if anybody who's listening to this right now is a Luciferian, they're going to take issue with us saying that this is what they do. They just engage in ritual sacrifice and they kill and hurt people. They're going to say, look, like anything else, there's the really dark aspects, and then there's the good. So we have the same polarities within Luciferianism. Now, I'm not defending them, I'm just saying this would be their argument.
Like in any religion, there's good and bad. So this is true.
So the Luciferians, we talk about it all the time. We talk about polarity. We talk about duality world, black and white. How do you experience love if you don't know hate? How do you know good if you don't know bad? We will talk about this. And in fact, the whole New Age movement, you ready, folks? Because some of you are going to your heads are going to pop off, is Luciferian. So the New Age movement was introduced by Tavistock through the Esalen Institute to roll out Luciferian philosophies. Right? Luciferians will talk about chakras. How many people do we know who say that they are light workers? Right?
So many. And
They work for the light. Who's Lucifer?
Lucifer,
Lucifer is the light bearer.
the light
He's
bearer.
the bringer of light. Right?
None
Again,
of those
folks,
things ever appealed to me growing up. And I'm not saying that I don't have aspects of myself that enjoys natural things and things that our body is trying to communicate to us about how it needs to be treated. But there's an aspect to that whole New Age philosophy that always just felt often wrong to me. When I would meet people who said they were light workers, something inside me said, stay away.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of it, I am a hypnotherapist, so I get into areas where I know what it's like to work with energy and to work with the mind and so on. But I agree with you that, there are aspects or components of the New Age movement, and I'm not a New Ager, by the way, by any stretch of the imagination, that I always found to be standoffish. I just didn't connect with it.
Exactly.
Right? So, but the point I'm making is that all around us, we live in a realm of Luciferianism, and its reach is it's full spectrum. It's full spectrum control. And that's why it's very important to understand what this is all about. If you're going to avoid it and you're going to think that you know all you need to know about it because you subscribe to a certain other belief system, then you're going to put yourself at a disadvantage. That's my view. Because they control everything. They control your media, they control your entertainment, they control your music, they control your governments, they control your military, they control your justice systems. They control everything, everything. Most of it funnels through the Committee of 300 within the pyramid of power. So the reason why the whole Paul is dead conspiracy is tied into this is because in the book, Billy tells us about Paulism. Right? So what Paulism is, its main objective is to build a spiritually infused counterculture. So when they talk about a spiritually infused counterculture, now we're talking about the controllers. This is what the controllers are doing. Paulism is a form of Luciferianism. It's a form of Satanism. And to be able to remold the world, to pull out the old traditional values, the old traditional belief systems, religious systems, educational systems, and all that, they are rolling out, the Beatles being a huge piece of this rollout with everything else, like the New Age movement and so on, to implement this change. And the change is, what is that change? The change is that they're working to create a one world government and one religion. That's what they're looking to create. One world government and one religion. What is that religion? Well, the religion is going to be Luciferian based. It's going to be Thelema, right? Some people, like I said, will use Satanism and Luciferianism interchangeably. Luciferians will argue that they are not interchangeable, although both have their philosophy and their ideology based in fulfilling your true will. Luciferians would make the argument that they balance it between the physical or the material world and the spiritual world, spiritual realm. So if you look at like a scale of justice, the Luciferians will say the scales are balanced and we stay objective. We never attach ourselves to any kind of a belief system. We don't join clubs. We don't join cults. We don't do any of that stuff. And they define cults as anything that you attach yourself to that tarnishes your ability to be objective. That's how a Luciferian would explain their approach to living their life, their existence. Again, this is my understanding based upon the research I've done. They will argue that Satanists, those scales I was just talking about, it's tilted too much in the material world. There's too much material world focus and not enough spiritual. That's what a Luciferian might say about a Satanist. And so it gets to be a very, very interesting dialogue, Patricia. It really does. Because, we're using terms that many people, myself included, at one point, were very uncomfortable talking about. Very uncomfortable, I bought a book recently. I'm not hawking these books, folks. I'm just saying some of the books that I read. Richard Page, Luciferianism, Alter Ego. These are some of the books that I'm starting to dig into to understand the belief system and how they think and how they operate and how they approach life. So, I think we as a truth community have got to start breaking down some of our self-imposed restrictions and barriers that we've put on ourselves. I'm not going to go read anything on Luciferianism, because if I do that, something wicked and bad's going to happen. I'm not going to really try to understand Satanism, because if I do that, something wicked and bad might happen.
If you don't understand these things, that's when something wicked or bad might happen.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, wicked and bad things are happening because
right.
Exactly. And this is why the world is look around. Exactly. This is why the world is in chaos. It's because that people are not understanding the realm. They're not understanding how it's governed. They don't understand how it is that it operates. And as I've mentioned before, the doctrine and the tenets of the people that are running the show, they don't understand it. And if you don't understand it, then yes, you're going to be at a severe disadvantage.
So by reading these sorts of books, that doesn't mean you're becoming a Luciferian or a Satanist. It just means you're going to understand the mindset of those who wish to control us, and in large part are controlling the greater society.
Yeah. I mean, look, I go back to this. It's very basic. We were born with the God-given gift, as I mentioned before, of intellect and reason. It means use your brain, and go explore and go discover. That's what life is really all about. It's about exploring and discovering. That's what it's about. And as soon as we start to box ourselves in, then we're going to have areas of our life that are unfulfilled or sub-optimized. You really do want to optimize your knowledge, and then take your knowledge and apply it and become wiser. And then you have wisdom. So this has been my path, and this is how I have been trying to explain it on various shows. And that's a big reason why I said I was going to sunset the whole McCartney thing, because I got what I got out of it. And I realized that it opened up another door for me to go explore. And so that's the door I'm going to head down. And like I said, I'm going to have Richard Balducci on my show. And the stuff that Richard has and the information he has is going to be mind-numbing. It really is. It's just going to blow people away. I'm hoping that I can do him justice, because his level of knowledge is just so up here that I really have to do a lot of homework to make sure that I at least sound halfway intelligent and track with him when I do the show. I mean, you know how that is, right? You get
I feel like
you're
that
oh,
talking
God.
to you. So.
No, that's don't.
But yes, when you do this show with Richard, I guess we'll find out. You'll give us some notification. How long in the future until this is going to occur?
Well, we had some technical difficulties.
Happening all over YouTube and Google right now.
Like a day or two ago, we were supposed to do the show. So we're going to do it next week. It's going to be pre-recorded, and it's going to take a little bit of time to get out, because I'm sure I'm going to have to put together some visuals for the audience, so that when Richard speaks, I mean, you can see what it is he's talking about. So I would say probably within the next 3 or 4 weeks, I'll have that show out.
Exciting.
So yeah, so the whole biological Paul Billy thing, it's all tied into this Paulism, which is a form of Luciferianism, and it was intended to, and it's still in play, to change the reality. It's to foster in a new age. And there are those out there that will understand this. If you're into syncretism and stuff like that, the age of Aquarius, right?
Harmony and understanding. That's what
right
now.
Harmony and understanding. This is why we're seeing so much upheaval in the world right now. Now, some people are going to say, I don't like the upheaval. I don't like where they're taking us, and so on. I'm one of these people that says, you know what? Uh, I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can and go along for the ride.
We don't really have a choice. Well, there is a choice. Don't learn, put blinders on, and go along for the ride, or go along for the ride, or die, I guess,
Yeah.
because we're going along for the ride whether we like it or not. I'd rather know a lot as I'm going along for this
Yes.
ride.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that, because I've told folks, I said, look, I'm not being negative or, or throwing the towel in, but there's no stopping this. I mean, what's underway is underway.
You can
You know,
help family members and friends possibly understand what's going on, but they might fight you.
yeah. I mean, look, my family fights me. I mean, my family doesn't, I don't even think they listen to my radio shows.
Mine don't listen to me either. So,
So the thing is to learn as much as you possibly can about the truth and how it works, because this way you can take that knowledge and you can avoid the traps.
mhm.
Plain
And
and
it's
simple.
kind of fun. They're playing a game with us, but in some way, if we know their playbook,
Right.
it's all about, we can kind of play their game back and help ourselves and maybe even save ourselves.
Well, and I would argue that there's a part of um, the ruling class or the controllers that actually admires uh, people that actually have attained a certain amount of knowledge and
Mhm.
are able to push back. You see?
Look, they're like they're up there in their dark office with a very long table, smoking cigars in suits, saying, "Oh, look at that Mike Williams over there. He's got a little backbone in him."
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll let him
uh,
live for a while.
we'll give him more organic food.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So it's very interesting, Patricia. This whole thing, and like I said, the whole Paul is dead piece of this thing evolved for me. It really did. At first, I was just, what happened and so on. And I was focused on the death of Paul McCartney. And then I got to the point where I just leapfrogged over it and said, okay, well, all right, he's not here anymore.
Yeah,
So
what does it mean?
what does it
Why?
mean?
That's the
Exactly.
important part.
Why? What does it mean? Where is it going? Why did they do this? Social and cultural engineering, for sure. Absolutely. We talked about it. The Summer of Love, psychedelics, drugs, free love, the breaking down of traditional religions. In fact, in the book, it states in one of the footnotes that Tom put in there that the Illuminati declared war on Christianity in 1962.
I believe
It
it.
says that in the book.
I believe it.
And if I'm sure there are Christians listening to this show right now, and if you're a Christian, I mean, you could, if you pause for a second, you could take a look at what's happened as far as your religion has gone and all of the attacks that it has been subjected to over the last 50 to 60 years or so, right? Look at what they've done to the church. So, I mean, I'm not saying that the Vatican is good, but what I'm saying is that there's definitely a concerted effort to tarnish the traditional religions. We could say the same thing about Islam. Look at what they're doing to Islam.
And
Islam is another one.
relationships between males and females and
Yeah,
traditional roles. Although, yes, you can do other things, but a woman being a woman and a man being a man, and also what they've done to children.
yeah, yeah. Well, in the mystery religions and in their ideology and their belief system, um, androgyny is very important, and that's what Baphomet's all about, right? Baphomet is androgynous,
Duality. Hmm.
duality, as above, so below. And so what we're seeing is they are imposing their spiritual belief system onto the masses, and I know there folks are probably thinking, well, Mike, do you subscribe to this? I mean, I don't know if I subscribe to something or not. There's a lot of stuff out there that I don't like. Absolutely, I don't like. Uh, I do believe in the traditional male female role. I do. I mean, I'll just say that. I'll admit it.
Me too.
I do. But if somebody has a different preference, that's okay with me. I mean, live and let live is really my
Some would
philosophy on
say what
things.
you're doing right now is you've bought into the tenets of Thelema simply by saying the live and let live thing you just added. But I know where you're going on this. I mean, I myself am a traditional woman and feel that way about men in my life being traditional men.
Right.
But if I met somebody like a neighbor or something that was androgynous or whatever, what am I going to go burn down their house? I mean,
Right.
that's the part where you're saying live and let live. It has nothing to do with Thelema, Satanism, or Luciferianism, that I'm not going to spit in that neighbor's face. I can't do anything about that.
It's
So
respect
be
for another
nice.
human being.
Right.
Right. I mean, I have members of my extended family that are gay. I love them. I mean, they're people just like you and me. So, I mean, what purpose does it serve to go after them or to attack them? To me, it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. And we'll be a lot better world if we all just respected each other a whole lot more. Which means even our thoughts, our beliefs, our ideas, and stop being so combative all the time. There's all this infighting and this people just putting hate on other people. And I mean, one of the things I wanted to mention here is that I know a lot of folks in the flat Earth community. They say, well, they really get attacked uh, for believing in the flat Earth or the stationary plane or geocentrism, however you want to refer to it, and that some of that environment is very toxic, especially on YouTube. And you, I mean, you and I know this, right?
Oh, yes.
So I've got to tell you though, I was talking to Mark about this. If it's possible, I believe this topic here, this whole Paul is dead topic, is more toxic than what I experienced with flat Earth. And my level of experiencing the toxicity with flat Earth is not anything near yours or like David's and Jaron's and the other folks that are really more dedicated to it than I am. But I think that if we can just have more respect for each other and just engage in civil discourse and try to have an open mind and listen to the other person. You don't have to agree. Like I mentioned before, agreeing to disagree is okay. It's okay. Uh, it'll be a much better place, and I know it sounds like utopia, but
Well,
you know,
I have a hashtag that's in the description box of all of my videos. It's hashtag same team. Now, that doesn't mean that research, that let's just use the Paul is dead researching. That doesn't mean everybody involved in that needs to agree on the exact specifications of Paul McCartney and et cetera, who's playing the role and why. Or in flat Earth, is it an infinite plane? Is it a dome? That's not it. Same team means we've all awakened. We all know
right,
something smells bad, and we're all here to try to figure it out. It's okay for you to look into different things that I'm looking into or to believe different things than I believe. We're on the same team. We are trying to get out of this mess. So, yeah, I mean, it would be a better place if we all took that on board. Be yourself, explore what you wish, but in the end, you're one of those people out here who's waking others up. So embrace that and enjoy that.
yeah, it's a tough business doing what you do and what I do. There's not a lot of there's not like huge rewards to this, folks.
No, not financial for sure, and definitely not a lot of kudos come your way. But
No,
in the end, when you lay your head on your pillow at night, I do feel that I'm helping in a small way. And that is really all you can ever ask of somebody.
that's all you can do. And we do get, and I know you do too, the emails that come in where people will say, "Thank you so much
Yes.
for," right, and that gets you over the hump,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you get all this other stuff, you get barraged with it all the time. You're this, you're that, blah 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 blah, and sometimes you think to yourself, and folks, I do think this to myself. Okay, why am I still doing this?
Why
Because
am I still? I agree. Most of us who are watching this video now, who are content providers or even watch videos, have often said that to themselves
yeah,
after looking
yeah,
at videos and looking at hit pieces or getting weird comments on their Facebook or their Twitter or in their inbox, wherever that may be. They just shake their head and say, I'm dealing with a bunch of crazy people who claim to be awake.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. So the thing is, when we do get those emails that come in and say, thank you so much, I appreciate your work, I appreciate what you're doing, and you'll even get emails that say, look, I don't agree 100%, but I mean, I really appreciate the work and the effort you're putting into it, whether it be Paul is dead, whether it be flat Earth, whether it be geoengineering, vaccines, whatever it may be, JFK assassination, 9/11, just pick one. GMO, veganism, you know, we're all faced with that, right? And you have to have thick skin, and you develop thick skin very quickly in this business. You really do. And there is no financial rewards to this. Just so folks know, because a lot of times I get accused of, making money on my channel, and
You are
making,
really Thomas Hugh Harriet.
oh my God, somebody actually wrote that. They said that I'm actually Thomas Hugh Harriet, and
Yes.
they said that I wrote Memoirs. I thought to myself, it was very flattering, first of all,
You're like,
because
thank you. Wow.
if I had written this book, okay, that would be the icing on the cake. But I'm not Thomas Hugh Harriet,
That's
obviously.
a funny one. I've got, you really are Linda Moulton Howe with lots of plastic surgery. I'm like, wow, really? She's actually out there speaking somewhere on UFOs, and
And here you are.
here I
Yeah.
am. So, yeah.
Yeah. So we have to just keep chugging along, and we just have to say to ourselves that we're doing what we believe is the right thing to do. Because in my heart, I just know I have to keep going. I mean, it's hard to explain why do you keep going? I have this. I'm not tied to the book in any way. I'm not compensated in any way. My YouTube channels aren't even monetized. Like my Sage of Quay channel is not monetized. My McCartney Paul is Dead channel is not monetized. The only channel I have monetized, and I only have 4,000 subscribers, is my guitar channel.
Mhm.
That's it. And I have no idea how much revenue that is, because it's only 4,000 subscribers, and I only put videos up, intermittently when I decide that I'm going to build a guitar, or
$10 a month, maybe.
I don't know.
Woo,
This is going to
party.
sound really bad, but I don't even know how to check.
Right.
So I'm going to have to go figure out how to check and see if there's any money in the bank over there. If it is, it's got to be, I don't know, $100. So yeah, so the payoff for this stuff, doing this stuff, is not, we're not running to the bank and just, loading up our bank accounts. That's not happening. You're doing this because you feel it's the right thing to do. I mean, that's why I do it. I know that's why you do what you do, and everybody else who's doing this work, why we do it.
It's deeply engaging too, because during the down times when it just seems like everyone around you is fighting and pointing fingers at each other, and they're truth seekers too, you say to yourself, like you said, why am I doing this? I might pull away for a while. And I've taken breaks up to a month at a time. And during that month, I'm still on my phone, checking YouTube, seeing what videos have come out, and itching to get back and interview this person or that person,
Yeah.
or talk about this subject or that subject. And I end up coming back. And it's only because this awakening in general and all the various topics is so important to me. And I feel that all of us have something to offer. And if I step away, there'll be like a bunch of other people who rise up and take my place and do better than me. But those who have been in it for a while and continue being here are a beacon of hope to other people who are just getting into it, who might be a bit afraid because they've seen the hit pieces, they've seen the weird comments, and they don't think they could stand up under that kind of pressure. So if you cave and leave, or if I cave and leave, or if Bob from Glowbusters or any of these other people who've been around for a long time do that, it will make some other people who are newly born into this feel less secure about putting their name and their face out there.
Yeah, in fact, I did a video today on Facebook where I said that stop being a keyboard warrior. If you've got something to say and you feel like what you have to say is important and it can add to making the world a better place, then do something about it. Put yourself out there. I'm not saying you have to put yourself out there in a big way, but fire up a YouTube channel, do a blog, have a website, do these things. Because one of the things that happens, like with this whole Paul is Dead piece of work that I'm doing, is I get barraged with emails and PMs from people that are saying, "Oh, could you look at this? Can you check this out? What do you think about that over there?" And when you get like hundreds of these emails a week, There's no possible way to be able to do this. And then you think to yourself, well, why am I taking on this responsibility? Why am I feeling like I'm the end of the funnel? You know, and it's going into my mouth like a fire hose full of information. And I've actually been pushing back on folks. I said, look, you make some valid points,
Do
and
your
so
own
I
research.
do your own research and put your own presentations together. Well,
Yes.
I'm not so sure I can do that. I don't know how to do it. Look, when I started doing this stuff, the radio shows 5 years ago, I didn't know what I was doing either.
None of us did. We all started with 0 subscribers, and I didn't even know how to do a Google Hangout. I didn't even know how to use headphones. I had feedback. I mean, even if I was in radio before, working at a radio station is not like doing a YouTube video. We all start with nothing and, build as more people become interested in what you're putting out there, and we all have something to offer. So yeah, like you, I encourage people to do it.
Well, and people have asked me, they said to me, why is this even important, Mike? Who cares? It's just a musician. It's just a band. And I said, the reason why it's important is because it's way beyond a musician and a band. So when you get into this, you're learning about Tavistock, you're learning about the deep state, you're learning about the pyramid of power, you're learning about Crowley, you're learning about magic and the occult, you're learning about Luciferianism, you're learning about Satanism, you're learning about a lot of stuff. That's why it's important.
There's even fashion involved in this, and there's hairstyles involved in this. I mean, I know that sounds superficial, but I'm talking about people who are only in that superficial girly world.
Right.
They don't understand how the hairstyles of the Beatles changed, not just because it was interesting and cool to have a different look and the clothing, because the taste of society was being formed. And all of this is in this whole Paul is dead thing for anyone to explore based on what it is that interests you specifically.
Yeah, I say to people, don't you want to know how social engineering and cultural engineering is implemented? Don't you want to know that?
Because it's going on right now.
It's going on right now. It goes on all the time.
Right.
It's going on all the time. You watch something on television, you're reading a newspaper, you're reading a magazine, whatever. It's around you all the time. It's 24/7, 365 days a year, forever. And the more you know about the tactics and the approach, the better off you're going to be. It's like we were saying before, you learn the traps, you know where the potholes are in the street, and you can avoid them. So that's why it's important. So
why were women at one point directed to wear pants? Why were women at one point directed to wear miniskirts? It's all part of this same time continuum we're talking about, that the Beatles played a huge role in, with the free love and the masculine feminine merging with the pants. I'm not saying women shouldn't wear pants or short skirts, but what I'm saying is that we were directed to do these things. It's not just because we saw it on the cover of Vogue magazine, ladies. Yes, you did, but it got there for a reason in the Tavistock Institute. And the Beatles, yes, part of the reason why.
Right. The Beatles, along with other major bands that came out of the British invasion. You know, the Who.
And look at my guitar Zeppelin. Right here that I've got.
Very nice. I see that. It's an Epiphone.
which I can't play, which it was on my bucket list for my birthday of February 2015, and I found Flat Earth and started a YouTube channel in March, or got into it in March of 2015, and I just never learned to play. And that's a symbol of my laziness right there. Actually, it's a symbol of my mind engaged elsewhere, where before it was on more superficial things. And I know that you feel that way too, because you're a musician, and I know I'm not, but I've got a guitar. Are there things, I know you still try to live your life, and part of the reason you're walking away from PID, Paul is Dead, is because you need to engage in your real life living stuff, but you're still going to make videos on other topics. Do you feel that it's your life's different since you started with your radio show and looking into truth? Do you think your life is objectively better or worse?
It's better.
Agreed.
It's better because I'm not on the hamster wheel anymore.
Yes, exactly. You're not a slave to the system. You're aware.
Right. And I am aware. And so actually I'm much more at ease. I don't have the fear factor that a lot of people have, because they're watching the news incessantly. And I just don't have any of that. I stepped away from television a long time ago. When I got into the radio shows 5 years ago, I was doing the blog actually before that. I started the blog back in 2011, I think it was. So that's what, 8 years. So I would say over the last 8 years, Patricia, as I got more and more acclimated to how the world really works, life got better. It got better because I wasn't focused on the things, the distractions, and the inane nonsense that they want us to focus on. Right? Those are just distractions, folks. That's to keep you from fulfilling your life. It's to keep you on that hamster wheel, on that conveyor belt. They want to pull you away. I mean, we are in the Iron Age. So anybody who follows Martin Kenny's work, and in the Iron Age, we're actually transitioning out of the Iron Age now, and according to Martin, and we're now transitioning and segueing into the Bronze Age, which is supposed to happen December of 2020. It's not going to be like light switch on, light switch off. It's going to be a very methodical, slow transition.
Kind of like getting into the age of Aquarius. It's not
right.
Switch on, light switch off, but
right. So when they talk about the Mayan calendar back in 2012, the Mayan calendar was encoded. It was code for moving out of the Piscean age to the age of Aquarius. That's when the age of Aquarius formally came into play.
We all thought that, I did anyway, I won't speak for everyone, that something would happen that day.
No, right.
That things would change. When we woke up, oh, nothing happened. Oh, Mayan calendar, that's just stupid.
Right. That's right. And so the thing is, the reason why you feel, it feels stupid is because you're waiting for something to physically change. And that's the thing we have to understand. There is a spiritual aspect to our life that more and more people have got to plug into. So those who are spiritually connected will sense and understand that change in frequency.
And you start changing.
And you start changing.
Notice it.
Exactly. And so like I wasn't aware of this, years ago. I was like everybody else. I was in the matrix.
Mm-hmm.
But once I became aware of how this works, so we say that whatever they tell us, think the opposite, right? So when they start talking about the physical material world, and you have to start thinking about the spiritual and metaphysical world, that's what you need to do. Switch to thinking, because they're trying to lure you into one direction when you really should be going in the other direction. And so, so I would say that with the work that I've been doing, not just Paul is Dead, obviously, because I've done a lot of other work, even though at this point, a lot of other people probably don't even know anything else I've done.
Because you're the PID guy.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I want to see if I can get back to other stuff, so I don't walk around with the PID guy button.
You're like an actor now who was famous for playing that one role and can't get hired unless they play that one role.
Yeah, yeah, I'm like Captain Kirk, William Shatner. So so things, to answer your question, Patricia, things got better, much better. I know you're a vegan. I'm not there yet. I'm a vegetarian. But just that shift alone, going from, I didn't think I'd ever give up eating meat. It just wasn't in my consciousness at one point. It wasn't in my awareness. I didn't even think about it. Like, you didn't even think about
all of these
how
things.
You got the food,
Me either. I mean, with food before I became vegetarian, then vegan, or with any of it. I never thought about NASA or the shape of the earth or Paul McCartney or any of these. The clouds in the sky, they look weird. There's X's in the sky. I just thought planes flew by and did that and just went about my merry way in the matrix. And then one day, gradually, one day I noticed that I had gradually changed the way I looked at the world. That's how it was. It snuck up on me. And then I couldn't deny it. And you can't go back. And you don't want to go back.
I realized I made a shift when I would try to talk to friends and family about things that I had discovered. And then had the very rude awakening, because I was very naive. I thought that they would be all ears and they would listen. And they would find it interesting because I found it interesting. Only to find out that they thought I was crazy.
Right. And these are people who'd known you for years and knew you weren't crazy, right?
Right.
But all of a sudden they just figured you went nuts, right? That makes no sense.
And that's how you know, folks, that you've reached a point where you've started to awaken, is when your friends and family think you're nuts. Okay?
It's a great day. Enjoy it.
So I reached that point at going back several years ago. And it was a shock at the time. I didn't like it. You don't like being rebuked by, your own family or friends, but 2020's hindsight. So when I looked back at it, I said, actually it was a good thing. It was a turnkey moment in my life when I realized that, hey, you know what, Mike, you might have turned the corner on this thing, So
You've made it when
yeah,
you're rejected by everyone who you
exactly.
love.
So the other thing is what I wanted to do was just maybe mention a little bit. I want to thank you for having Jonathan contact me about the Mount Shasta
Oh, yes.
Flat
That would
Earth
be great.
Conference.
Yes, that is coming up in September, and you are going to be there. I'm going to be there, and many other people are going to be there. Jonathan Shalimar, weirdly enough, who's the organizer of the Mount Shasta Conference, is my guest tomorrow, which is April 12th, 2019.
Excellent. Okay.
So we'll get to meet the man who's putting the Mount Shasta Conference together and find out what he's all about, why he's done it. And he seems like a very interesting individual. So we're going to be on Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes tomorrow, Jonathan Shalimar and myself. So that'll be good. But I do want to, before we close our show out, touch on the 3 different ways to read the memoirs of Billy Shears, because the first way you'd read it would be the way you read any book, just as it is.
Right. So you will hear folks say that memoirs is fiction, and on the surface, they're justified for saying that because the book is classified as historical fiction. But the thing is, Memoirs is a Masonic book, and it's written in layers. And there are 3 layers to the book. This is why Tom is not referred to as the author. He is referred to as the encoder. So Tom has special training that he received. I don't know, had to be way back when, I'm assuming.
So
Tom and
Thomas
I.
Hugh Harriet, the author or encoder, is a real person that
Yes.
you have spoke with at length, and there are real photos of him as well.
Yes. So Tom's a real person. So yeah, that we should cover that first real quickly. A lot of times
And he's not you.
No, he's not me. I'm not Tom Hugh Harriet. And
Right.
Hey, Tom, I'm sure Tom will watch this. No, Tom's a real person. I have had many communications with Tom over the last 2.5 years. The communications were based upon questions I had about the book. So, and where Tom could, and he's been very graceful, he has responded and he's answered the questions that I've had. There are things that Tom cannot talk about because Tom has also signed non-disclosures and confidentiality agreements, has Billy.
Is he himself illuminated?
I think Tom's a Freemason. I don't think he's in the illuminated degree. So I would say that Tom is probably a 32nd or 33rd degree Mason. Okay. That's a guess on my part, but I do want to say that Tom has been great. Okay. And I don't have enough kind words to say, because as I've made my way through this, he has helped a lot to answer a lot of questions that, quite honestly, he probably didn't have to answer, to be quite frank. So he is a real person. I did speak to Tom once, going back, I guess, about a month ago. We had a conversation because I had some questions with regard to the Crowley aspects of the book, and I wanted some clarification on some things. And so Tom and I spoke for about 35, 40 minutes on the phone. He has a Facebook page. His face is up there. He's got family members and so on. So that whole thing there, where people want to say he's not real and his name's an acronym. His name is not an anagram. His name is not an anagram. His name is Thomas Hugh Harriet. So so Tom has this training in encoding, and it's referred to as masterfully being written or masterfully disclosed. So the first layer of the book is you would read the book as you would read any book from left to right. The second layer is on each page of the book, there are bolded out letters. And if you read those bolded out letters on each page, you get another layer of information. And the third layer is what they refer to as the acrostical code. So the acrostical encoding is the odd numbered row, the first letter of every odd number row. If you read vertically down, you're getting even more information. So with each layering, the first obviously is just reading the book. So if you read the book left to right and you don't read any of the second or third layer, you're going to get a lot of information out of the book. Then you take the next step. Read the bolded out letters. Now you're getting more information. And if you then read the acrostical code, and actually, Tom, they have a book they published where you don't actually have to sit there with a pen and pencil and write the letters out. I mean, they have a book. It's cheap enough. I think it's like $7 on Amazon.
The
You can get
cheating version.
the cheating version. Exactly, right? The cheat sheet. You can then read the acrostical. So when you take all three of those layers and you put them together, this is where the book pulls the truth through. So the initial layer, historical fiction, right? That's how the book is classified. But as you dig deeper, the truth emerges, comes out. And this is how Billy operates, by the way. I mean, Billy, being who he is in the Illuminated degrees, he is highly trained and versed in the esoteric, in mysticism. Okay, so say what you want about Billy Shears, Billy Shepherd, Billy Campbell. I will say this: he's a very, very bright man, and so I mean, he operates. He's always firing on 8 cylinders. In fact, Tom had said to me in one email conversation we had going back a while that he's still very much on top of his game. And this was an email exchange we had last year. So Billy was 81. His birthday is September 9th, 1937. And so he'll be 82 this year. And Tom said, I mean, he's still going. He's still very, very focused.
I have a couple of questions. We
Yeah.
know he married Linda McCartney and they had children, Stella McCartney, daughter, who is a vegetarian and has a fashion line. And do you think Stella McCartney, his daughter, or any relatives know that he's not biological Paul?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They all know.
So if there is revelation of the truth after Sir Paul McCartney dies, Billy Shears, will there be lawsuits against the family of fake Paul, and will all of their wealth be taken from them?
No. This is all contract based. So Billy signed a contract way back when, and that contract stipulates, what he can do, what he can't do with regard to the character of Paul McCartney. He can use the name Paul McCartney because it is a corporate fiction.
Like all of our names.
Like all of our names, okay? We have to distinguish between birth name and legal name. So Paul McCartney is his legal name. William Shepherd or William Campbell is his birth name. The other thing that folks have to understand, Patricia, is this all resides within the pyramid of power. Okay? He is not going to be arrested. He's not going to lose his wealth.
He was knighted. I mean, so
he was knighted. And Billy has done great work in the minds of the Illuminati on behalf of the Illuminati.
Right.
He's going to go out with a ticker tape parade. He's going to go out with accolades. He's going to go out high-fiving.
And even people in the Matrix or even people who aren't, who are in the car and the radio is playing, or satellite radio, and they hear a Paul McCartney song, they're, tapping their foot and singing along. He's created, on a very superficial level, a lot of pleasure and happiness for people.
Yeah, he's in that ruling class. He is in the ruling class. He's part of the ruling elite. And, there's no way that his money is going to be taken away from him. And the only way it can be is if he breaches his contract. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So as long as he adheres to the contractual obligations that he has, which means, there's a certain path and timing for disclosure. And as long as he stays on that path, and I know in the book, he states he has attorneys that are looking at this to make sure that it all stays where it's supposed to stay. It's all going to work out. It's all going to work out. It's going to be fine. for him. Because there are a lot of folks out there that are in this Paul is dead community that believe that somehow something's going to happen, like he's going to be arrested, he's going to be brought to trial and all this stuff. And, it's not going to happen. I mean, anybody in the truth community should know that there's two realities. There's the world that applies to us, the laws and the governments and the police and all this stuff, the court system, right? And there's the world that applies to them. Those two worlds are not the same world. They're completely different. Completely
Look
different.
at all the people who were knighted, who it's come out that they're pedophiles.
Right.
Look at
Jimmy Savile.
Yeah, Jimmy Savile. Look at all of the things in the world where people who do wrong are applauded daily, and somehow what they do is spawn into being something good, and then the masses follow suit.
Or it's ignored.
Yeah, or it's ignored, exactly. Just brushed under the carpet.
The examples I use, Patricia, is John F. Kennedy was killed 60 years ago. 60 years ago. What justice do we have for JFK and his family? Who's been arrested for the assassination of John F. Kennedy? I mean, we all know, anybody, that has a half a brain knows that it wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald. It was a major conspiracy, right? So what happened to those folks?
And what about Q? That's one of those things everyone had been talking about, buzzing about in the past 2 years. With Hillary Clinton will be led away in handcuffs. And I just said to myself, no, she won't.
No.
Never.
No. The Q thing is a regurgitation of David Wilcock and Ben Fulford from 2012, and they were talking about mass arrests, right? So they recycled that narrative again 7 years later. That's what they did. There's no mass arrest, folks.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction. It's to get your hopes up. It's to get you to continue to believe in that somebody else is going to step up to the plate. Somebody else, an authority, is going to take the baton and lead the parade. It's not going to have to be you. You don't have to do anything. You could just sit back and you could type away and you could put memes up on your Facebook page. It's not how it's going to work. So they put that out there to do exactly that, to keep you from acting, to keep you from going out and being a true activist, to really speak your voice, right? People are relying on other people to do this. 9/11 is another example, right? Now, we all know that 9/11 was an inside job. I mean, it wasn't 19 hijackers. It's ridiculous. But the people that were involved, nobody's been arrested. It's 18 years later. George Bush Jr. is still around, and Dick Cheney's still around, and Donald Rumsfeld is still around. There's been no justice. And so the point I'm trying to make is not to paint this like, the glass is half empty picture. It's just that these people operate in a different realm.
They operate in a way in which the masses won't ever see them taken away in chains. So therefore, they are going to be comforted if they happen to see a conspiracy video about 9/11. They'll be comforted to know, well, they'd be arrested by now if they really did something wrong. So they didn't. So it was planes and it was hijackers. Yeah. So it's
the system protects them.
Yes. And people need to understand that awakening will not be televised. It's up to you individually.
Right. That's right. It is up to you. And the awakening first has to come through you doing your inner work. You have to awaken. You have to understand yourself first. What is your life purpose? What are you here to do? I mean, so many people don't even ask themselves that question.
Pay bills or have fun. Those are the two things that most people would, and not people who are watching this, but most people would say that's what they need to make money and they want to have a good time.
To survive. That's what they say. I need to survive, not thrive.
Horrible.
Survive. And that's how many people think. So the point I'm making is that we have two different worlds at play. It's the world of the elite class within the pyramid, and then there's the world outside of that pyramid. And if you're outside that pyramid, you have to play by the rules that they set in place. The rules that they set in place for us does not apply to them. The only time it applies to them is if you're in that pyramid and you screw up, and then you're out. Okay, this is one of the things that I've had a couple of folks contact me who are Freemasons, high-level Freemasons, and told me that if you're a Freemason and you let the cat out of the bag, right, and you don't do it masterfully, then it's referred to as feeding pearls to the swine. This is how they refer to it. And you're out. You're immediately out. That's it.
So you'll mysteriously die, or you'll be charged with something that you didn't do and there'll be no way to get out of it, or something you really did do will be revealed.
Or they'll just give you the boot. It could be that that you don't get hurt in any way, that you could just get the boot. So in other words, your career dries up. Right? So if you're an entertainer or you're an artist and you're thriving, and then all of a sudden you're gone, like whatever happened to so-and-so. I'm not saying that for everybody who just kind of disappeared, that's what happened, but that's one of the alternatives where, in other words, the gravy train is over. You get the boot, you're off the train, you're out. Other times, if it's more serious, I guess, yes, they'll put you through the system that the profane, that would be us, the unknowing, have to contend with.
It's like the I hate the term goyim, but in a way it's the same as the profane. And they, the ones who are illuminated, are the sacred.
Yeah.
Or they think so anyway.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's why they call themselves the Illuminati, because they are illuminated. They are enlightened. Okay. I mean, that is what they believe, their role is. And so, I mean, I have it, we won't get into it here, but I have another view with regard to how that pyramid works. I believe that the pyramid of power changes its management system as it makes its way through the different ages. So in the Iron Age, it has to have a governance in place that ensures the Iron Age plays out the way the Iron Age is supposed to play out.
Because everything's been planned out long ago, as you said.
Yeah. And then once it moves into another age, like the next age is the Bronze Age, the all-seeing eye, or the pyramid, remains in place, but it changes its management system. It changes its governance in order to reflect now how the bronze system needs to be managed. You see?
I can see a new sign. It's a pyramid with an all-seeing eye, but right across it says, under new management.
Under new management. Yeah. Right. And so if you play that out, then it would do that in the Silver Age and then into the Gold Age. Right. So my way of looking at this is that there is a governance, there is a management system that is in place to ensure that the reality that we incarnate into operates the way it is intended to operate by the Creator. Okay. And again, this is a theory that I have. This is something that I'm giving more thought to. And, we'll see where it goes from there.
It's interesting. It's a fun ride. And yeah. I think that while we're on this ride that we really can't get off unless we take our own life, we should try to learn as much as we can about the twists and turns that are yet to come our way and what happened back there in our rearview mirror.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've been wonderful in helping us all along that journey. And we're looking forward to all the wonderful things that you're going to do. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Patricia. I am very select with who I interview with, especially with this whole Paul is dead thing. And so I'm really glad that you invited me to come on the show, because it's always a great discussion, and we could talk about a lot of other stuff too. And I'm looking forward to meeting everybody in September in Mount Shasta.
Mount Shasta, here we come.
I don't usually do those things, folks, and but something within me was saying that I should go, so I'll be there.
Wonderful. Can't wait to see you. That is Mike Williams, and you will find links to all of his work, his music, various places you can find him on his varying channels, the Mike Williams Paul is Dead channel, and his Sage of Quay Radio Hour channel, and his Sage of Quay Radio Hour backup channel, and who knows what else is there, but it's all in the description box. And Mike, we will see each other soon, and perhaps we'll do another show together. You never know.
Absolutely.
I'm Patricia Steere, and this concludes this episode of Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. And until we meet again, and we shall, keep it flat.